on December 14th, 9 years ago. We were in the firehouse where parents literally came together to find out whether their kids were alive. Literally. I will never forget that moment as a parent and a public official, to be with parents waiting to find out whether their children had survived a massacre with an assault weapon that never should have been in the hands of Michael Lanza. And I can't recall that day without a lump in my throat and my heart breaking. But we look back at that moment. We remember those 20 beautiful children and 6th grade educators in Newtown. We remember the 900,000 people, 900,000 who have perished since then. We look back, but we also need to look forward. And our challenge is, on this 9th anniversary, to make sure that when we reach the 10th anniversary, we will have accomplished measures that stop gun violence in this country. We know what we have to do. We know what it will take. And we are inspired by, most importantly, the survivors and families of that day, 9 years ago in Newtown, the survivors of all of the losses that we've seen since then. Many are with us today. Thank you again for coming. We're inspired by their courage and strength to continue. And I will say, last night I was so moved at the vigil by Mike's song, and I'm so moved by Kristen and Mike's song as a couple, as friends, as family of mine. And I would gladly yield to Mike to sing right now. Except I notice he doesn't have his guitar.
I'll bring it next time.
We'll hold you to it. Because we know that their courage and strength will inspire the nation. It already has. The vast majority of Americans are in favor of these measures. The background checks bill that Senator Murphy has championed, and I've been proud to work with him on it. The safe storage measure, Ethan's Law, which I have introduced, and we are all working. Rosa DeLauro in the House has led it there. All of the other measures, ending the sweetheart deal that the gun manufacturers have on PLACA, the assault weapons ban, high-capacity magazines. There are common sense issues. We know they work because they've worked in Connecticut, but Connecticut cannot do it alone because guns are brought across boundaries. There have to be national solutions. And so we resolve today to be as determined as we ever have to make sure that our Republican colleagues are held accountable. We have a political movement here. We have a social movement that cannot be denied. We're on the right side of history, but we need to do it before that 10th anniversary because thousands of people will die, hundreds every day, as a result of gun violence, not only in the massacres like most recently Michigan, but also in the one-by-one killings that occur on the streets of Hartford and New Haven and all across Connecticut, all across the country. And taking these steps will help save lives. Keeping guns out of the hands of dangerous people through red flag statutes, such as we have come close to adopting in the Senate, or at least introducing, and background checks bill. And I'm proud to introduce now Senator Murphy, who's championed that measure.
Well, thank you very much, Dick, and I'm so honored to be here with the Connecticut delegation, with so many tremendous friends and advocates, to once again call on our colleagues in the Senate and the House to end this horrifying parade of carnage. I went to the floor of the Senate a few nights ago to once again explain to my colleagues that this doesn't happen in the United States of America because we're unlucky. It happens in the United States of America and nowhere else because of choices we have made. This is a choice that we make to subject our kids, our young people, our communities to this level of violence. And if leaders make different choices, then we will get different outcomes. Our communities, our towns, our schools will be safer places. And you don't have to look any farther than the last year to understand the impact that policy makes. Now, 2020 was a deadly year across this country, a 5% increase in violent crime. But if you break that down between the states that have universal background checks and the states that don't, it's a totally different story. In the states that have universal background checks, violent crime went up by less than a percentage point. In the states that don't have universal background checks, violent crime went up by almost 10%. And that's because the policies that we're talking about work. But I want to focus, before I turn this over to Poe, not on what we haven't accomplished, but I want to focus on what we have accomplished in the last 9 years. Because there are dozens and dozens of state laws that are now on the books in Connecticut, but in blue and purple states all across the country, that are protecting citizens from harm. There are dozens of private companies who have changed their practices, divested from gun purchases, kicked people with guns out of their stores because of this movement. And things have begun to change here. Rosa led an effort to fund anti-gun violence research for the first time in decades. That's going to save people's lives. Right? We passed legislation, the Fix NICS Act, through the Senate that improves the background check system. And we are hopefully weeks away from passing the Build Back Better Act, which includes in it a historic amount of funding for anti-gun violence initiatives to fund programs in places like Chicago, New Haven, and Hartford to keep people safe. So we shouldn't back away from the progress we have made at the same time that we are challenging our colleagues to take the next logical steps in right-sizing policy here with what 90% of Americans want. So this is a day in which we challenge our colleagues, but we also celebrate the work that we have done. And I'm just so grateful that Newtown Action Alliance has done the hard work of bringing together all of the communities that are affected by gun violence. This isn't a story of just school shootings. This isn't a story of just urban gun violence. This isn't a story of only accidental shootings or suicides. All of these communities now, have a place to be able to advocate together. And Poe Murray has done the hard work of organizing these vigils and these efforts every single year, but also of bringing together folks from all around the country to speak truth to power. So let me again say how grateful I am to be part of this movement and introduce my great friend from Newtown Action Alliance, Poe Murray.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator Murphy, and thank you, Senator Blumenthal. Thank you, Representative Hayes and DeLauro and Larson for being here, and all the families and survivors who make this trip every year to make some noise and to urge Congress to take action. I got into this fight because my neighbor killed 20 children and 6 educators 9 years ago next Tuesday. And, we decided that we need to bring other survivors and families from all over the country with us to D.C. until Congress took a comprehensive action to reduce all forms of gun violence in this country. Like Senator Murphy said, it's not just about school shootings. It's about gun suicides. It's about community violence. It's about unintentional shootings and domestic violence and et cetera. And there's so much that could be done. We track the bills that are being introduced in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. There are hundreds and hundreds of bills that are being blocked And we're hoping that, our families and survivors who traveled to D.C. with us, I mean, there are hundreds more that would have been here, this week with us. But because of COVID, we have to scale down, the vigil and our events here. But they'll be back in December of next year to make more noise and to beg Congress to take action. One of the most important things I think the Senate could do right now is to end the filibuster. The filibuster is killing us. It's killing our children. It's killing more people than ever before. When I first, joined this movement, 33,000 people were dying a year, and now it's 45,000. There are nearly 100 million more guns in America. And we need to do more. And there's so much more that could be done. And Senator Blumenthal mentioned all of them: assault weapons ban, universal background checks, ERPO laws, repealing PLACA, banning ghost guns, passing Ethan's Law, and so much more. So I just want to leave, one important message for Congress. Do your job. Yes. Do your job. Yeah. Your job is to protect Americans. Young and the old, everyone. And the federal government has completely failed. And we're frustrated. We come here every year being more frustrated. It's been 9 years. And no substantive action on gun laws, that could be passed right now. And it's supported by majority of Americans. Right now, Manny Oliver, who lost his son in Parkland, is sitting outside of the White House waiting for the president to meet with him because he wants a comprehensive strategy to tackle this issue. And he's frustrated, but I have to tell you, we're all frustrated. We're here. Thousands of families across the country are frustrated that there's inaction on this issue. So I want to ask Representative DeLauro to come to the podium. One of my favorite representatives in Congress. I love her hair and shoes.
Thank you so much, Po, and I'm really honored to be here with everyone. And Po, you talked about, there is frustration, but the frustration doesn't get in the way of the action and the continued activity and the continued work that you all do to keep this issue front and center, because we have to address it, we have to act on it, we have to do something. I thank you for the work that Newtown Alliance does. I'm pleased to be here with my colleagues, Senator Blumenthal, Senator Murphy, Congressman John Larson, Congresswoman Johanna Hayes, and all you should know, everyone in the delegation working so hard day in and day out to address this issue and to bring meaningful common sense reforms to keep families safe. To the survivors and the families who are here today, there aren't words for us to express our gratitude to you, to those who have lost loved ones, and to those who have surviving children. What is it that we can say to you except what we all say is that we've got to move, we've got to act, and however long it takes, we will get to that goal. But I also want to say, and I see the pictures of youngsters who have lost their lives, and it makes you well up and makes you want to just cry. And we talk about prayer, etc., and I'm all for prayer and want to do that, but it's got to be more than prayers. It's got to be action that we're dealing with. I want to say, and they'll tell their own stories, to Mia and Camille, and to Maggie, who are here today, Camille and Maggie, who are from Newtown, survivors of Newtown, and Mia, who's a survivor. I want to say these days that if they are leading the way. Our young people are leading the way in this effort. And those of us who are in positions in the House, in the Senate, or other elected officials, we either need to follow their lead or get out of their way. Because they really are the heroes in this effort. It is 9 years ago. all of us will always remember where we were on that day and what we were doing when we heard about the slaughter of innocents in December 14th, next Tuesday, and our hearts continue to be broken by what happened that day. But you know, it's really so striking, I think, to all of us. The frequency of these events is unrelenting. And last week, what we saw in Michigan, 4 students left dead, many more wounded, a teacher in Oxford, Michigan. And it appears that the incident could have been avoided by simply educating gun owners on how to be responsible gun owners. And that begins with life-saving requirement of safe storage. Safe storage. And that's why, you know, I've introduced it on the House side, Senator Blumenthal on the Senate side, safe gun storage legislation that honors the memory of Ethan Song, who lost his life with an unsecured gun in 2018. And this law would set federal standards for gun storage, incentives to states to create, implement safe gun storage laws. This legislation is about public health. It's about child safety. That is what it is all about. Don't let anyone kid you that this is about gun control. It is about child safety. And we now have 157 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives, and we're going to get to 218. We're going to get there. And there's so many, and everybody's standing in the cold, and my colleagues will speak, and I'm going to introduce the songs so that they can speak, both Mike and Kristen. But no parent should lose their child because of an unsecured gun. No, and their dedication, the song's dedication and their strength knows no bounds in this fight. And they are leading the way. They are giving all of us the courage that we need to move forward. And Senator Murphy mentioned this. We have this year, we will increase the amount of money for gun violence research to $50 million. Yes. There is the $5 million in the Build Back Better legislation, which we are going to pass. Make no mistake, we will pass that. And let me just say again, I want to introduce to you Mike and Kristen Song. No one is going to stand in their way. No one is going to stand in their way. We need to just follow their lead, and let's get Ethan's law passed at the federal level. The time for us, all of us, is to act now. Mike and Kristen, please.
My name is Kristen Song. On January 31st, 2018, my beautiful 15-year-old son Ethan was shot in the head in his best friend's house with an unsecured gun. He had zero chance of survival. The father, the gun owner, Dan Markle, stored his 3 handguns and bullets in a shoebox. Dan Markle's reckless storage of his deadly weapons led to my son's death. The moment he failed to secure his guns, the first domino fell. He was charged with no crimes. He had suffered no consequences. Instead, the prosecutor charged his 14-year-old son with manslaughter. From the moment those words passed her lips, I knew I would set out to change the laws in this country. We started in Connecticut and passed with overwhelming bipartisan support Ethan's Law, which requires all gun owners to secure their weapons if children can gain access to them. This child safety bill is now in front of Congress. The Michigan shooting just highlights the urgency, again, to pass safe gun storage laws. Ethan's death, the death of those 4 children in Michigan, was not an accident. Their deaths were 100% preventable. Had those fathers, those gun owners, taken seconds out of their lives to properly store their deadly weapons, my son would be a freshman in college, and those 4 high school students would be texting their parents their Christmas list. Instead, those parents are living the unimaginable. They're planning wakes, they're planning funerals, they're being asked, would you like to bury your child or cremate your child? Can I cut a lock of their hair before I bury or cremate your child? Because that is all that is left. While I applaud all of the organizations that emphasize that it is the gun owner's personal responsibility to secure their guns, that clearly is not enough.
We need laws like Ethan's law. It is our job to protect our children. It is our job to protect other people's children. America, never be afraid to save a child.
Please join us. Kids around?
Lock guns down!
Kids around?
Lock guns down!
Kids around?
Lock guns down!
Let's pass Ethan's law!
So now I'm going to introduce John Larson, who is from Connecticut and who is a champion of Ethan's law also.
Thank you so much. What a deep honor to stand here with those of you who are on the front lines, the survivors, the students, mothers and fathers. I walked the streets of Hartford with Mothers United Against Violence and Hartford Communities That Care to see the devastation that has happened and to know that there are solutions. And as Senator Murphy has pointed out, a number of positive solutions that we've put forward. But Poe, you're absolutely right. Where in the Constitution does it say that you need 60 votes to pass a bill?
Right.
The greatest threat that America faces in our democracy and our republic is not from this pandemic we're all struggling through. It's not some foreign entity like the Chinese. It's right here in our own government. If the people's will cannot be executed through a vote in the United States Senate, then we can't move legislation forward. We can't enact the will of the people. And it's not just gun violence. It's voting rights. The very thing that will prevent majorities and families and victims and people who know what the right thing to do is in a democracy, and yet we're denied the thing that everybody takes an oath of office to do and swears allegiance to the Constitution, and then your responsibility is to vote. Thank God we have two champions from the state of Connecticut in the United States Senate who understand that, and a delegation in the House of Representatives that will continue to pass legislation, but it's going to take everybody in a grassroots movement across this nation to make Mitch McConnell and others understand that the people's will be heard. And as Poe said, do your job.
Yeah.
Vote.
Yes.
God bless you.
I met Maria Pike on the 9th month anniversary of the Sandy Hook tragedy. We worked with Representative Robin Kelly to bring in survivors from Chicago because we felt that gun violence impacts the communities of color more than communities of privilege, and we needed to make sure that they had a seat at the table. So I'd like to introduce Maria Pike.
Good morning. It is true. I have these shoes, as I called them last night, have come to D.C. for 9 years, and we Chicagoans have walked the halls of Congress telling our stories ever since. These stories have to be told to lawmakers who have the power to do their job, save the lives of now 45,000 people who did not need to die. This year, we walk across this land like we have in our commitment to save our children and communities from gun violence. After 9 years, our shoes are worn. They are tattered by the fight and the isolation of COVID-19, but we also have become resilient and strong. Our shoes are now comfortable because this is our legacy. We have lost fights, but we also have won many. We continue to gain allies, and we must remain vigilant and vote for the ones with the grit to do what is right. With these shoes, we continue to follow our loved ones' marching orders, and we invite our leaders to seek the moral courage to walk alongside and honor with action. This is the time. It will always be the time, whether it takes 9 years or 90 years. This is our call to action. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Representative Johanna Hayes. She was actually my representative until a couple of weeks ago. I live part-time in Florida, and I decided to register in Florida because we need to vote for representatives and senators who will pass gun laws. So Representative Hayes.
Better find me 2 new votes.
I'll find you 2 more votes. I will.
For the team.
Yeah.
That's a sacrifice. So, I'm struggling today. I'm just going to be honest. I usually am completely optimistic as I face my work, and over the last couple weeks, a feeling has set in that is very foreign to me. We're talking a lot about the legislation that has been introduced. My first piece of legislation in Congress was to prohibit the use of federal funds to buy guns in school for teachers. I introduced legislation in September on school safety and preparedness. I have legislation that is set to be introduced in the next few days on grant programs to do comprehensive violence prevention programs in schools. But I didn't come to Congress to just introduce legislation. I am angry and I am impatient. And generally you guys come to hear from us what we're going to do. Today I need your help because I am at a very difficult place that is incredibly foreign to me. There are 535 people in the Congress and 1 person in the White House who has the ability to do everything that we're talking about here. Our agenda has to change. We have to make sure that we are electing people who believe in this, who will push for this. And I watched Senator Murphy on the floor of Congress last week, on the floor of the Senate, and I know that we've done so much in the last 10 years. I know that so much has been accomplished. But I also know that I failed the 3.5 million educator colleagues of mine who sent me to Congress to be their voice. And I know that this isn't just about school shootings, but I would argue that there is a place in this country that we should all agree upon should be safe from even the thought of gun violence, and that is a school. Every year I struggle with this because as I recognize that my grief can never match the grief of the families, of the survivors, of the communities. I was in a classroom the day after Newtown. And when you have kids who are looking to you as the adult saying, why did this happen and what are you going to do about it? And you feel so incredibly vulnerable and you think that this is the place where you can actually do something about it, and you feel even more vulnerable than you did in that moment, there is something wrong with that. So I am struggling today. I am struggling because you need for me to be your champion and you need for me to be strong, but I feel completely broken because as we are doing a post-crisis evaluation on what happened in Oxford, everyone's talking about, well, what happened at the school and what did the teachers do and what did the community do? Imagine the burden of responsibility that is on an educator to say that I am the only line of defense right now because the federal government won't help me. I have failed miserably to all of those teachers who have been affected or impacted or don't know if they're going to be the next person. I have failed miserably to all of those students who in the days and weeks after were afraid to learn. The 535 members of Congress have failed miserably. And when I go home, people don't care about the filibuster or the process or how the sausage is made. All they know is that nothing has been done. So today, and I recognize how completely selfish this sounds of me asking you for help. I need for part of everything you do. You know, when we talk about people who are single issue voters, that issue has to be electing the people who care about the things that you value. Because it is unconscionable that 535 people, that's it, 535 people in this country have the ability to do everything that we're talking about. We're not talking about millions of people, 535 people who need to be held accountable for every single one of these things that we are talking about. I feel better now.
We're behind you.
I feel better now, but it is debilitating and depleting to know that children cannot rely on us. And they don't have the ability or the capacity to do any of these things. The only people who can do it is us. And we have failed in that responsibility. So I am going to continue to push my colleagues in the House to make sure that we are gaining traction on these pieces of legislation, to push for leadership to bring them to the floor, to get a vote. In the last Congress, we passed landmark legislation in the House to push for it to go through the Senate, to make sure that Senate leadership knows that we will not ease up on these demands. Because if there is anything that we should all be able to agree upon, is that when kids go to school, there should be an expectation of safety. There should be an expectation that they will return home. And then when they are in their communities, that they can thrive and that the leaders are doing everything that we can to keep them safe. And with that, I will end and introduce Maisha Field, who is an organizer for Brady.
Good afternoon. These are my peeps back here. And I love each and every one of you. I just love you guys. My name is Maisha Fields, and I am the Vice President of Organizing for Brady, one of the oldest gun violence prevention organizations in this country. I'm also speaking to you because I am a survivor. I belong to a club that no one should ever have to be a part of. And for many of us, that admission to the club didn't begin with filling out an application. You know, like when you go to Costco, when you go to Sam's Club, go to Lifetime Fitness, Vasa Fitness, wherever you may recreate. This club began with pain and with agony and a knock at my mother's door, where she had to learn that her son, my only brother, was murdered 15 days after he graduated from college. And he was murdered because he was a witness to a mass shooting where he was shot. And a year after that, they tracked him down, found him as he was packing up from college to come here to D.C., and they murdered him and his beautiful fiancée, Vivian Wolf, at the young age of 21. If you met my brother, Javad Marshall Fields, if you met Vivian, their courageousness was so infectious. They both had brilliant smiles and a promise that they will never see. They weren't at Thanksgiving this year. They will not be at the Christmas dinner table. And this year will be another year on New Year's Day that I won't be able to celebrate with him and his potential. I want to say thank you to our courageous leaders who have gotten off of the sidelines. I'm grateful for courageous elected officials that we see here today. Yeah. For Congressman Murphy, for Senator Murphy, for Senator Blumenthal, for Representative DeLario and Representative Larson and Representative Hayes for getting off the sidelines. When you're fighting against gun violence, you can't be on the sidelines. This is a full contact sport. And I just want to let you know, you have not failed. The biggest part of this battle is showing up. Yeah. The biggest part of this battle is representing our loved ones, our family members, Ethan, Joaquin, Javad. I can't remember your name. Ricky. And so we have gotten off the sidelines to say that we can end gun violence. And we will make this the #1 public health issue because enough is enough. And each of us have the power to end gun violence in this lifetime because we've elected courageous leaders to do it. And if they don't do it, we're going to send them the red slip. You know what a red slip is? That means you've been evicted. That means you have to get out. You have to get out. And so my name is Maisha Fields. I'm the vice president for Brady and for organizing, and I represent the voices of the grave. People who can't speak, people who can't advocate. And together, we will win. Because when we fight, we win. Yes. When we fight, we win. God bless you all.
Thank you. Oh, Maisha, I'm so sorry you're part of this family. Next, we have Johanna Hill from Chicago.
Thank you so much, everyone. I'm Johanna Hill from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm really humbled to share in the sentiment of our expression on today. My city, Chicago, is often nicknamed or referenced as Chirac, and I don't deem that as a sense of normalcy or something that I would pound my chest to be proud of, because it's not normal to have violence reign through a city so tough that people consider it a nickname that's considered and connected to so much violence, even terrorism. And so today, I stand as a survivor because I lost my brother to violence in Chicago, December 1st, 2008. And then my family had to relive it again, August 21st, 2021, when I lost my cousin, who I grew up side by side, to a mass shooting in the city of Chicago. Today, I look at our response as not just a reaction, because a response means that we consider what it's going to take to end gun violence. Not just react because we hear a sound, not just react because a mass shooting takes place in a school, but a true response. And I just want to tell you my response. My response as a South Side young girl who grew up on the South Side of Chicago was I choose to be a clinical therapist to my community today, to address urban violence in the community, to interrupt the perpetual response by my community to untreated mental health, and therefore burst into violence. I spoke to my aunt before I came here. I spoke to the mother of my cousin's children before I got here. And I asked, what can I say? They said, can you ask them, how did the guns get in their hands? How? Well, this is our response. This is our opportunity to respond. We can make a difference through gun law changes. We can make a difference by coming together with a compassionate and a humane response. Be intentional. Be intentional. Don't just react any longer, but truly respond to this epidemic. No longer is Chirac normal to me. I'm coming against that, and I want to have Ethan's dad's slogan, his slogan. When kids around, lock guns down.
One more time.
When kids around, lock guns down. These are normal responses that we should have and take and share in. That's all I got.
All right.
Thank you, Joshan. Next, we have the co-chair of the Junior Newtown Action Alliance, Maggie LaBanca.
Hi, I'm Maggie LaBanca.
Thank you.
I'm the co-chair of the Junior Newtown Action Alliance, and I'm a survivor of the Sandy Hook school shooting on December 14th, 2012. But my best friend, Daniel Barden, was not. He was 7 years old, and he was murdered. And his family and the victims' families and my fellow survivors and our Newtown community has had to deal with the repercussions of a man's deadly actions. I've had to grow up with a trauma that I didn't fully understand, because at 8 years old, you can't fully understand the effect of a gun and its bullets. But 9 years later, at 17 years old, I'm starting to understand. I'm starting to understand that we have yet to make substantial progress at a national level. I'm starting to fully understand, though, that we need change. We need, as Poe said, to end the filibuster, because it is killing us. We need to reconsider universal background checks, and we need to pass Ethan's Law, because as a child speaking, it's a Child Safety Act. Because 9 years later, at 17 years old, all I want is to feel safe. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Next, we have another leader from Newtown, Camille Paradis.
Hi, I'm Camille Paradis. Yeah, sorry, I'm short. As Poe said, I'm a board member of the Junior Newtown Action Alliance at Newtown High School. Almost a decade ago, I was sitting in my third grade classroom at Sandy Hook on December 14th. I was 8 years old, and that day did not end how I thought it was going to. I had the premonition that it was going to be a good day because of the lightness of my backpack, because I was a child. I left that day with unimaginable trauma and people I would never see again, and I didn't understand that. And for months and years after, every year, I am told never again. I am told we will never forget you. And yet it seems as if the government has. Because I've watched it happen again and again and again, and every single time it brings me back to sitting in the fire station waiting for my parents to pick me up. So I'm going to ask the government and my leaders, my congressmen, the senators, and not just of Connecticut, but of every state in the country, to please act. I'm asking as a child for adults to do their jobs correctly, for them to protect us with national laws, to keep the guns out of dangerous people's hands, to end the filibuster, to pass Ethan's Law, to pass universal background checks. I'm asking, and I hope I don't have to ask again. And with that, I would like to introduce Mia Tretta.
Thank you. And as she said, my name is Mia Tretta, and I'm so glad I could speak with you guys today. The leading cause of death for teens 12 to 19 is now gun violence. A problem many people see as scary, but distant. It will never happen to me, right? Before November 14th, 2019, I was with most of you. It will never happen to me in my safe, small community. I was not worried. Then everything changed. On November 14th, 2019, I was a normal high school kid. I was hanging out with my friends in the quad of my high school in Southern California, like every other day. I was a freshman, excited for my first Sadie Hawkins dance, which was just in a few days, and nervous for the Spanish test I had later that day. I was a normal high school student. Suddenly I heard a bang on the Thursday morning. The quad that was always loud with kids and talking and laughing went silent, then turned to screams. Another bang came when I was on the ground. I was able to get myself up and run across campus to my favorite teacher's classroom. From there, the first responders came and I was ambulanced to a nearby park, then airlifted to Holy Cross Hospital. I was shot in my lower abdomen with a .45 caliber ghost gun by a boy I didn't know. I went from a normal high school student to a gun violence survivor. 2 lives were stolen from us that day. Gracie Muehlberger, a 15-year-old girl who I've only heard good things about, and a girl who always had a smile on her face, and Dominic Blackwell, a 14-year-old boy who was my best friend, an infectious laugh and a heart that inspired so many. It's not fair that gun violence did this to my community and my school, but now that it has, I'm using whatever voice it has given to me to elevate my story and fight. We need stricter gun laws and regulations. We need background checks and safe storage laws like Ethan's law. This isn't a maybe anymore. Kids are dying. And you can't wait until gun violence affects you to take action. I'm just a kid, and I cannot change laws on my own. Heck, I can't even vote. But you can. You can fight, and you can represent me with common sense gun laws. So I hope every day you remember mine and other survivors' stories that will push you to fight with me. Thank you. I'd like to introduce my mom, Tiffany Tretta.
My name is Tiffany Shepis Tretta, and my daughter Mia was shot. Shot. I never thought I would be saying those words. My daughter was shot at her high school. This isn't okay. This isn't normal. And we shouldn't be here in D.C. asking leaders to keep our children safe. We should be out here doing a tour and hoping to catch a glimpse of somebody famous or somebody that you would see on TV. This shouldn't be her childhood. This shouldn't be the life of you survivors. But here in America, it is. We now look at our life as before Mia got shot and after, because the two are so very different. Some would say that we are the lucky ones. And yes, sadly, in this situation, we are. But that lucky means our daughter was shot in the stomach and lived. Lucky. Can you imagine that? A little carefree daughter I had before is gone. Her childhood stolen because somebody was able to get a gun online without a background check and leave it out for a child to bring to school. Preventable, right? Yeah. 100% preventable. Yeah. Things need to change. We need universal background checks. We need safe storage laws like Ethan's law. We need to completely ban ghost guns. And we need not to just pat ourselves on the back when our children do wonderful things like win a race, but we also need to be held accountable when they do terrible things. We cannot do this alone, but many of the lawmakers out there can. Some of the ones that were here today are doing amazing things, and they need more help and more backup. Right now, any one of you that are here today are 1 degree away from gun violence, that you know some of us. Don't wait till it's you standing up here advocating for your own child's safety to do something. Do it now. Modern weapons need modern laws. Be the change. And I would like to introduce my friend, Leonard Jihad, Connecticut Community Violence Intervention Program.
Feels like we brought Connecticut down to D.C. Absolutely. Good afternoon. I'm Leonard Jihad, Executive Director of Connecticut Violence Intervention Program, where I supervise a group of outreach workers that work with youth that are engaged in the most risky activity in the greater New Haven community. So by risky, we allude to shooters, gang members, and also victims of violence. We work around the clock, 24/7, 365. We're also working with wages where we cannot even sustain a livable income. Most of us have to work other jobs just so we can sustain, in Connecticut. So we get home, we work another job, we try to grab something to eat, we take a nap, because we never know when we have to respond to the hospital after a shooting. We're also charging our cell phones around the clock also, because we just always have to be ready. We're the modern day Minutemen. Yeah. And we don't complain because we know what we have to do. But I just have to ask, is this the best that we got?
No. Do better. No.
I say not.
No.
I say not. Is this the best we got?
No.
My prior life, I worked in adult probation, and when someone came on probation because of something dealing with their attitude, behavior, response, or whatever, we sent them to cognitive behavioral therapy programs because we wanted to have them have behavior change, to change their thinking from law breaking to law abiding. But we waited until after they got in trouble. So I said, why do we wait until after they get in trouble? Why can't we do this before they get into trouble? And why can't we implement these programs into schools? And the answer was, we don't have time. We don't have time to implement these programs. But I have a 12-year-old daughter, and once a month they go through active shooter training and drills in her school. So we don't have time for cognitive behavioral therapy programs, but we have to deal with the trauma of going through drills for a 12-year-old child in case there's an active shooter. And the folks will say, don't worry about it, it's just a drill. It's not a drill when they're hearing gunshots in their community. When they're hearing gunshots at night and they can't go back to sleep. When they can't go on the next day, and perform in class. So it's just more than just a drill. And we're dealing with trauma. We're dealing with trauma that permeates everything in their life, from learning to their behaviors to everything. And we know what's worse. The only thing that's worse than trauma is untreated trauma. We have to do better, and we can do better. And just like Sis said, this isn't normal. We have to do better. Every 15 minutes, someone in the United States, someone dies because of gun violence. 45,000 people are killed every year by gun violence in America. We can definitely do better. Build back better, absolutely. So help and fund the underfunded programs that are working in the community. We're talking about evidence-based programming, but let's talk about common sense. This is not normal for us in America in 2021. So help us, help our children, help our cities, and help America also. We've got to do better. We can do better. This is not the best that we got. No. Thank you.
Well,
I'd like to introduce my comrade Pepe Vega.
Hello, Pepe Vega from New Haven, Connecticut, and my entire life was severely impacted by gun violence. At 14 years old, I remember one of my best friends being killed by a gun 8 minutes after we played a game of touch football. And after that, myself, I was shot twice, once in my late teens and another in my early 20s. Last time I got shot, I remember I was sitting in a pizza place with a bunch of my friends, and somebody came by and shot 82 times inside the pizza place. This has to stop. It's ridiculous. We need a comprehensive solution. Gunshots were the soundtrack of my life. That's all I know. Even at my age now, when I go to a gas station or come out the grocery store, I'm fearful that I might get shot. So I encourage you to pass the Build Back Better Act.
Yes, Build Back Better.
That's right. And I also encourage you to pass Ethan's Law. Because all the guns that come into my community, there's not a gun store anywhere in my community. So they're coming from the borders all over the place, and they land in my community. I speak to kids every day. They can get a gun easier than they can get a library book.
Wow.
I'm just lost for words because it's sad. It's sad. That's all I know. I'm even here in Washington, D.C., and I'm looking around to make sure, you know, that I'm not going to get shot. Traumatized. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful.
My name's Michelle Morgan. I'm a priest in the Christian church. I'm an Episcopalian. I'm a listener to prophets. You have heard prophets today, people who have wisdom about what is wrong with this world right now and the way they're living their lives. Survivors have wisdom that we need to listen to. As Christians, we're taught to listen to the prophets. They're calling out from the wilderness because nobody's listening. And I, for one, am furious all the time. I hear stories that no one should have to live. I talk to people all the time who've suffered losses that make no sense, and Congress needs to do something about it. I have prayed consolation prayers for all of these people behind me. I know the families who have suffered. I have heard stories of many, many different ways that people are being killed in this country, and we have to say enough, and Congress needs to do its job. My prayer today is of condemnation for those who are standing in the way of health and life and families all over this country. And an ambulance drives by, and again and again and again, we see more and more people join a family that none of us want to be members of. Congress, do your job. Do right. Pass Ethan Law. Get the money from Build Back Better. President Biden, talk to Manny. Do your work. I am part of a 2,000-year-old tradition, and the church doesn't change. I'm wearing a stole that is a modern affectation of the last 15 years. Orange stoles are no part of my part in the world. This is created because of gun violence. This is a gun violence prevention stole. Didn't exist before. People keep dying, and the church is trying to respond. We need the government to respond. Thank you very much. I want to introduce Dave Stoll from Newtown Action Alliance.
Good morning. My name is David Stoll, and I'm Vice Chair of Newtown Action Alliance. But today I stand before you as a father of 2 Newtown students. Both my girls are in school right now, and that's exactly where they should be. When we arrived here yesterday in Washington, I looked down at my phone to check my email, and there was an email from our school district telling us that on next Tuesday, which is the 9th anniversary of the Sandy Hook shooting, that the schools will be closed and that our kids will be studying from home. It's a stark reminder of how this impacts not just those that are impacted most directly, that are either shot or killed, but it impacts entire communities. It impacts students. It impacts teachers. It also is a stark reminder of the people in the last year and a half during COVID that are railing the loudest about keeping our schools open tend to be the people who are deniers of science, deniers of fact, and they are feigning concern for our students' best interest and our children's best interest, and they're out-and-out liars. If they cared about our students, then they would be doing everything they can to keep them safe in school. What happened in Oxford just a short time ago, where there was a school shooting and then almost all the schools in Michigan were locked down for several days because of threats, is the same exact thing that's happening in Newtown, and the reason our schools are closed. Sandy Hook Elementary was closed several years ago on the anniversary because of a bomb threat. Our schools will be closed next week because of ongoing threats that are now ramped up because of what happened in Michigan. So our legislators need to stop pretending they actually care about our children and do something and prove that they care about it by passing comprehensive gun laws, and let's start with Ethan's law, which will keep everyone safe. Thank you.
Before we conclude this press conference, I want to encourage parents and grandparents and other Americans from all across the country to join the fight to end the gun violence crisis in our country before it happens to you or your community. Thank you so much.